So welcome to everyone to this webinar, which is about to discuss what's going on in the world of talent and to understand why we are all facing a talent shortage when trying to find talent in what we call the educated type of skills profiles. And to discuss this today, we have with us 33, what I mean two amazing guests, people that are in a close relationship with talent, so really trying to understand or analyzing what's going on with talent. On one side, we have from Amsterdam, we have Anita. So Anita Lettink is an international keynote speaker, advisor, and author. After a global career in HR and payroll consulting and outsourcing, she started her own business to help CHROs and their teams to understand how work is changing and what they can do to prepare their employees and companies to thrive. Yeah. So she has been recognized as a top 25 global thought leader on the future of work and a top 100 HR tech influencer. She's also the author of How to Select Your Next Payroll. Anita is partner at Strategic Management Center and the founder of HRTechRadar.com. So definitely, that Anita has a lot of things to share with us today about the future of work and talent shortage. And from New York, we have John. So John is the author of Forbes Freelancer Revolution blog, and he's a prolific and well-respected writer about the freelance economy. His 2016 book, Agile Talent, was the first to describe the impact of the freelance economy on careers and organizations. In 2018, he created the Agile Talent Collaborative as a space for collaborative research and best practice, sharing in the freelance economy. In 2021, he led the global survey on freelancing, co-sponsored by the University of Toronto, and 77 different freelance platforms in 30 countries. And in the 22, now he has become an expert in residence at the openassembly.com. So really welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for being part of this discussion. And as a moderator today, I'm here, Alex Collard. I'm the co-founder, one of the co-founders at Outvise. Outvise is the largest online talent marketplace for business tech freelancer experts. We do have, as of today, more than 37 independent professionals connected to our platform, and we serve companies in more than 40 different countries. Before joining Outvise, my background was in management consulting, and I have worked in companies such as McKinsey & Company, Accenture, or Oliver Wyman. So let's start the webinar, and that's the presentations are done. So as we were saying, the context of the webinar is to understand what's going on with the talent shortage. We're all facing more and more talent shortage in a day-to-day life, professional life. So today I want to show, we want to focus on three main topics that are impacting the future of work and impacting the shortage of talent. The first topic itself is the talent shortage itself. So trying to understand what to expect in the coming future about the talent shortage. The second topic is about remote working. And the third one is about the freelancing boom. And we have represented them here as gear wheels, I mean, interacting each one with the other, but you could also think that these images are kind of bombshells, you know, and about to explode in any moment, and things make things even more complex. Yeah, but having done this introduction, let's move now to the panel discussion. We are going to keep the chat open, so for all participants, all the audience, they will be able to add their questions at any time. Just go to the chat, and on the right part, you can post your question and answer that we will answer after the initial discussion. So Just to start the discussion, and let me ask a first question to both of you. So we are discussing here the structural shortage in the labor market, but I would like to have your view to what extent this is really structural or is it just circumstantial? I mean, do you think that this will solve in the future? This will get easier to find talent in the short future, or do you expect things to go even worse? So what will be your view on this, Anita?
Hello, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. My view on the talent shortage is that in a lot of geographies, this is a structural issue. And the reason for that is our demographic makeup. And you see this playing out in Europe, Japan, China in a couple of years from now, as also in North America. And it's actually quite simple. If you look at the numbers, people leaving the workforce in the next 10 years are in numbers far larger than people entering the workforce. So there is a mismatch between what is coming in versus what is coming out. And as example, in the Netherlands, for instance, 60,000 more people get out of the workforce than come in. So there's a 60,000 person gap per year for the next 10 years, just to give you an idea of what is happening. Before you think, well, that is detrimental, it is in a sense, but there are also countries in the world where that does not happen, where in fact demographics look like a perfect pyramid. More young people than older people, and this is what you need. So it isn't the same all over the world. And for people who are on the call, I would very much urge you to look at the situation in your country before you determine if this is structural or incidental.
Okay, but is it as simple as this? Yeah, it's just the demographics. And I remember
No.
when you first explained this to me, I mean, oh yeah, look, at the end of the, yeah, that's quite simple, yeah.
So it's demographics, but then in the second phase, you also have to look at what kind of skill sets are available. And a second element that plays into this is that we know that in Europe, not enough people study computing, for instance, or beta or sciences. And that ties in to the next problem, which is a skills mismatch, meaning that the skills that companies need cannot be found in a labor market simply because, first of all, there aren't enough people. And second, if there are people, then they have the wrong skill sets. So yeah, it's a compound problem. It will be very complex for us to solve this.
Okay, I see that Chris was able to join us.
Yes, I finally worked out how to find the invite in my email. Sorry, I've been waiting on it. I've been waiting on another link, but no one there.
Yeah, sorry, no, sorry for us, and not sending the things quite enough clear. Yeah. So Chris, welcome. I mean, Chris is joining us to complete the guests with a different view. I mean, Chris is less, let's say, scholastic than the other two guests. She's on the real world. I mean, she's a chief people officer at Gamma Telecom. Gamma Telecom being a fast-growing digital telecom company across Europe. She's experienced across multiple sectors, particularly in private equity and in the UK, EMEA, and North America. She has strong expertise in talent acquisition, scaling organization, strategy development, building employer brand, employee experience and engagement, talent, and organization development. She has previous work before working at Gamma in other companies such as Equinix, Vodafone, or Simply Health. Yeah, so she's really an expert about how to manage, about how to attract, retain, and manage talent. So she's the voice who's gonna tell us today in the webinar how things are from the real world when you are sitting on as an HR director and you need to deal with the current shortage of talent. So the first question that we were addressing here, also for you to know, Chris, is to what extent you think that the current talent shortage is something structural or just circumstantial that is going to be solved by itself. And Anita was telling us that, oh, now this is as structural as the demographics could be in the different countries. But what will be your I'm going first to John to have the other kind of academic view on this, and then we will come to real life with you, Chris. So John, what will be your view on talent shortage? Is it going to be solved in the short future?
You know, I think Anita nailed it in a couple of ways. I'd add a couple more pieces. One is it's really lumpy out there. So for example, I just had a conversation with somebody that's in India and thinking about building a marketplace that focuses on marketing, sort of marketing disruptor, ex-agency, etc. And my comment back was, we really have a lot of those. And we have a lot of those at a time when marketing budgets are coming down. Don't build one. Don't build another one of those, because we don't need another one of those. But as a matter of fact, the contrary view is that we have 30,000 people in the world right now that are seen as excellent in AI, and we need 1 million. So tremendous lumpiness in terms of, as Anita said, skill sets. There's another factor that I'd add that I thought was really interesting. So there's a profound disinterest in many parts of the world and for many young people in joining big companies. They are nervous about that stuff. And there was a recent study that was done that said that 87% of employees that were surveyed would be a lot more interested in freelancing if 3 problems could be solved. Mm-hmm. One is that there was less income volatility perceived, right? A lot of money this year, bad money next year. Second is fear of losing some benefits that people value. And the third is fear of loneliness. So we've got a really interesting situation where on the one hand, a lot of lumpiness, on the other hand, as Anita said, we're real mismatched demographically. That's actually getting solved through technology more and more, not entirely, but increasingly. But the mismatch in terms of expectations around working for a big company versus a more entrepreneurial or solopreneurial approach is an area that is exacerbating the feeling of a structural problem. It isn't structural, but it sure feels like it sometimes when 12 million people over the course of 1 quarter decide that they're going to leave their jobs in the US.
Okay, sure. Thank you. And Chris, what are your experiencing in the day-to-day life? I mean, are things going worse? Or do you think that things are improving now that, for example, big giants are releasing some tech talent?
It's very unpredictable, and I'm listening intently to what John has just said. I think some of these issues clearly are the result of sort of post-pandemic evaluation of, it's like, who am I? What am I here for? What do I want to leave behind me? And I think this coming face to face with something on such a global scale has made people evaluate things in a way which I would say is unprecedented. So I was very flattered you think I'm an expert, and also that I'm in the real world. I feel neither of those things. I feel I'm less an expert than I'd like to think I was. And so some days I think, what world is the real world anymore? What is the real world? Is it the world in my head? Is it the world in my office from home? Or is it the office I've always known? So I think we're all, those of us who might have even had ambition to be expert are having to be humbled and think, well, actually, I'm asking way more questions today than I have answers for. In fact, I'm not really here to give you any answers. I'm here to probably ask to consider a few questions. One, we've always had this idea that, well, tech's always in short supply, so you compete for tech by having sexy technology, cool offices, bean bags, pinball machines, free food, birthday, take your birthday off. it's not working anymore. You know, it's what we found is that, you know, there is an ongoing over demand, under supply of the right kind of tech ability, and you can bend over backwards to offer all the flexibility and other features and benefits and packages that you like, but ultimately I think we started to look at offshoring. Everyone has got there. You start to look at flexible working. Everybody's done that. I'm kind of waiting for somebody to say, here's the next thing, and I don't know what that is. But the old-fashioned bit of me, the old school, as we say in England, the old school bit, I still think that there is a place that we can't become too despondent with demographics and with the labour market. I think if you have strong leadership, strong, caring, authentic, decent managers who do the right thing, that is such a strong part of your own value as a company, and the value that you offer, that the deal, if you like, that you offer companies. And, you know, when I start to think too much about future, you know, the future and the future of labour markets, and, you know, as John says, you know, we had over 1 million in the UK who left the labour market post-pandemic, in that bracket 50 to 60, which means that not just, I mean, that's not particularly the tech end, but it's people who've reevaluated what they want to get from the contract. I think the contract has been well and truly, if not broken, it's been stretched to breaking point. The things that we took for granted, you know, I turn up, you pay me, all of those kind of things have shifted towards a greater focus on the employee, the employee's need for purpose and satisfaction. So smart employers, whether it's for altruistic reasons or selfish reasons, it doesn't really matter. Smart employers think about the conditions we need to create in order to fulfill some of those needs. That's some of that need for purpose. I would say also creating that environment. It's funny, you know, you give people choice and people tell you what they think they want. And then the reality is what people think they want is not always what they end up wanting after 6 months. So all of our tech guys were saying to us, we don't want to come in at all. We've brought in flexible working. We've got a kind of a framework by which we give a lot of freedom to managers to assess. And I'd say the vast majority of our technical teams have said, no, we've proved that we can work remotely. That's what we're going to do. And we're not going to come in under any circumstances for any meetings, anytime, really, ever. Over to you. Funnily enough, 6 months in, this question of loneliness and community still keeps popping up. And I think the challenge for us is not bringing people back into the office. I think hybrid is here. It's not going to go away. The challenge is thinking about what purpose the office fulfills as part of your talent strategy. What work can be done best alone is done best alone, but there are things that are best done together. And we've had, you know, it's finding the balance between flexibility for your personal situation and environment and the commitments you built around, you know, childcare, elder care, personal, you know, fitness or whatever. And then the need just as human beings to get together and be in the same environment at the same time for collaboration. So repurposing your office to create more space for meetings, less space for desks, less space for offices is a way of saying when we get together, it kind of now needs to be an event. It's not a default that you go and sit at a desk. It seems very 18th century. You know, you go and sit at a desk between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 or 6. Now we go into the office to collaborate and to break out and to meet people and to socialize, actually, much more personal time. So that's a bit of a long, I mean, I don't have any, as I said, no answers, but that's how things are looking for us.
That's very interesting.
I think every 6 months it feels like we need to revise our view and ask again what we can do to support.
Well, I think that was very interesting. In fact, you already jumped into my second question, which was about remote, yeah, and that has an impact of pandemic. About, I mean, remote has become the new normal after the COVID, and now, as you are saying, I mean, companies are trying to find where is the right balance, and what we are seeing is a kind of battle in between workers that are demanding flexibility, and even threatening the companies, as you said, to quit if they have to come back full time. and companies that are increasingly insisting for in-person presence in offices. And as you said, I mean, the discussion is, or the right balance should be around the theme of what is the purpose of the office, or what is not going at the office by default, but what is the purpose of the office. And I think that was a very, very interesting message. But what will be your view on this from a more an academic point of view, I could say, Anita? If any view, yeah, on remote working. Yeah. You're on mute, Anita.
Apologies. Yeah, so from my perspective, I said I'm going to leave the academic to John, but so two things actually. I wanted to address something that John mentioned about people wanting to work for themselves and having different ideas about maybe the value of work or what work means to them. And I think one of the major reasons that they are not joining corporations is because corporations have not been good for them. And what I have found through my research is that we're dealing with a generation that saw their parents get fired during the financial crisis, right? No matter if they had a permanent contract, that did not matter. If things go bad, if financial problems hit a corporation, because salaries are such a large cost element these days, then the first thing they do is they look at their workforce. In the early months of the pandemic, when we were not sure what was going on, and before government stepped in to aid companies, that same thing happened to them. So their first experience almost with a permanent job was, oh, something bad happens and my permanent job is gone. First month of the pandemic. Later on, it got better as, especially in Europe, government came in. I know there were PPP plans in the United States as well. So in several geographies, the government stepped in and helped companies through the pandemic, provided they would keep their employees on payroll. So that's to address what John was saying. Now, what Chris was mentioning about remote, I have been a remote worker for over 10 years. All my people, when I led teams, all my people were outside of the country. So very familiar with that topic. And what I have always found very useful is you need to make it about meaningful connections. So people should not come to the office to read their emails or to write a report. People come to the office to meet others. We did a lot of that, for instance, when we had project kickoffs. No matter where people were in the world, we would all bring them to one location just to build connections. And we would talk through the project plans. We would do something social, something fun, have dinner, so that people at least had seen each other face to face and had talked about their personal circumstances and their families. And once you have that, then working remotely is not such a big deal. But I believe that fundamentally people are still looking for human connections, just not every day from 9 to 5.
May I build on that? Because I think that's fabulous. I think both of you added a lot of stuff. And I do want to, I'll be the academic today because I want to share some data that I think will be fun for everybody. First of all, to Chris, you made a point which I thought was so smart. There was a study of sort of pandemic related human capital at Microsoft last year. I don't remember the whole report, but it's worth reading if you can get your hands on it. But there was one statement that I just absolutely loved. And the statement was, people will come into the office when it's worth their while to do so. Very simple, very simple. By the way, I've got two sons that spend most of their time working from home. One runs a group of 50 people of senior bankers around the world. One runs a sales organization for a freelance platform. and they do just fine working remotely. And when they have to go visit somebody, they go visit somebody. When they have Zoom, they have Zoom. And when they have Teams, they have Teams. So there's not a lack of human connection per se. That's the first thing to remember. Technology has made it possible for us to disconnect from location and still be at work. So that's the first thing. Second is, this is not your father's or grandfather's or grandmother's employee. 40% of the workforce in the US and an equivalent amount in the UK, and I believe more in the Netherlands, have side gigs, or they're part of side gigs. So they're already managing portfolio careers, and they're learning that the job that they have full-time, these 40% of the workforce, is moonlighting, which means that they've got an alternative source of income to some extent, but they're learning how to be confident. They're learning how to be capable. They are learning how to manage a business, and they are learning that they can do just fine in a way that my father never could believe that. And so that becomes very important. Now the question structurally, Alex, is, are managers ready for a different kind of employee? Because the employees who are doing side gigs are what we call freelance light. They have the same expectations of freelancers and a full-time job. And so when they say we're not coming into work, they're not saying they're not working. They're just saying they're going to manage more and more. So let's talk for a minute about what it is that freelancers expect, but really what all employees are increasingly expecting. 3 A's. Sorry for the alliteration, but I'm an old consultant. First is they want autonomy. They want to know that they have more freedom, more flexibility, etc. The second is they want more agency, more impact, more ability to control the outcomes that are important to them. And the third, they want affiliation, autonomy, agency, affiliation. It's not just for the freelancers anymore. It's for everybody. And so people are creating, and here's for me, a very interesting structural issue. Are managers of big companies ready to work with the employee of today, not the employee of the future, employee of today? And there was a very interesting article in the Wall Street Journal this morning of managers that were secretly applauding what Elon Musk is doing. What we know is that the man is, he's a destroyer of engagement, right? At an epic scale. But there are a variety of managers who are saying, good for him. Let's push those people back. Let's make them come to the office. Let's make them toe the line. No more of this moonlighting crap. May I suggest that that is the most dangerous structural barrier to the future of work in a very real way. The unwillingness of so many managers to understand that things are changing, right? And what was the Dylan line, right? You better get used to this stuff.
That's a very, very dangerous way. Not understanding that the world has changed and trying to apply the world.
Yes, and hoping that we can somehow stuff it back in the bottle, which is nuts.
And talking about talent, the risk is always that you're going to lose the best ones.
That's
the
right.
best ones have always alternatives.
That's right.
You're going to be the less brilliant part of your team, which are going to say, okay, I don't have any other alternative. Let's go back to the office.
Last data point, and then time for me to be quiet. And that is, in our global survey, one of the questions we asked freelancers was, think about a typical client. How well do they understand how to work with freelancers? 45%, less than 50% said, my client company knows how to work with freelancers. Less than 50% at the same time as almost all these companies are depending and relying on more and more sort of alternatives to full-time traditional work. And they don't know how to do it. We have a tremendous responsibility to teach managers how to work with freelancers. And by the way, in teaching them how to work with freelancers, we're teaching them more and more about how to work with workers of the future, professionals of the future, who are much more inclined to think in terms of a portfolio of relationships than to have one relationship, which, going back to what Anita said, feels more and more dangerous than having that portfolio.
Okay, yeah, definitely. We're also seeing this around us. I mean, manager waiting for things to go back to where we were before pandemic, and thinking, okay, that was a pandemic, that was something very strange, but at some point we will go back to normal. And they don't realize that normal has changed, and normal is different. And also, it's different. I mean, you mentioned freelancing, and this was my I mean, the final wheel or gear wheel on the picture. Yeah. So freelancing. I think freelancing also a complete paradigm shift in the world of talent. So what we are seeing is a massive migration of talent from being employee to being freelancer, and this is a fact. I mean. In the United States, last data was that 36% of the active population has become freelancer. In Europe, we are probably not hitting 36%. We should be hitting at least 30%. So here my question is, I mean, this is a fact. We're not going to discuss is it the reality, you know. The world is now comprised of employees and freelancers, two pools. My question is how to deal with this new reality also from a point of view of talent. So what should companies do in regard to this new reality when they think about how to engage with talent? And here, I mean, as you are the super guru and expert in the freelancer topic, John, let's start with you.
I would give you one data point, which I think is very important, and that is that right now we have a supply problem in freelancing. The supply problem is that, as you know, Alex, running a marketplace, many enterprise companies, perhaps Chris's companies, perhaps companies that work with Anita on a regular basis, they can't afford to work with part-time freelancers, sidekickers. They can't afford it because there are conflicts of IP, conflicts of schedule, et cetera, that just make it hard. So we actually have three categories, Alex. We have full-time freelancers. We have part-time freelancers or side giggers, which represents a much larger population than full-time freelancers. And then we have people who are full-time employees and don't side gig. But it kind of looks like 40, 40, 20, not quite. But the smallest group right now are the full-time freelancers. We're going to see that grow over time. But right now, one of the challenges that we've got is how to deploy a very large population of people who are freelancing part-time and are driven to, because they're freelancing part-time, are driven to the lowest levels in terms of compensation, the smallest terms in terms of work, and they frequently are the lost souls of these big marketplaces, because at the end of the day, only 10 or 15% in even a good marketplace are getting regular work. So we've really got to think in terms of how to help freelancers who are part-time to figure out that they have the potential for a good life, economically as well as occupationally, and move them more onto the supply side so that we can really begin to take off in terms of freelance participation with the big companies, which is still a pretty small part of the total.
Yeah, you're fully right. Okay, Anita, what's your view on the freelancing topic?
I work a lot with companies that are trying to figure this out, right? And my advice is always start to identify the talent marketplaces that will play a role in your workforce strategy, because many companies have an internal marketplace, but they haven't done the work to identify which external marketplaces they will need. And if you do not now start to build up that experience and start to understand which ones are good, where you can find talented freelancers and which ones won't serve you, then when you really, really need them to execute your strategy, it's too late. So you really have to, first of all, decide that, yes, this is how work in future will look like. A part of my workers will not be on my payroll. They will be freelance or whatever, temporary contract you want to give them. Where do I find them? How do I decide if they were any good? And most of all, we talked about managers. Managers really need to start to learn, because I think this is one of the big defuncts of the pandemic. They need to learn how to define working outcomes, because you will not see these people work. You will have to tell them what you need to have done in outcomes, and then set them free to do their thing. You will not see them for the 2 weeks or the 4 weeks that they need to deliver the work. So you have to be very specific and very skilled in bringing them to deliver the things that you thought that they were going to deliver. And that is very, very difficult if you do it for the first time.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely should learn, decide what you need from them and learn how to work with this
exactly
new talent.
And also how to incorporate them into your teams or into the work that you already have done internally, right? So I think one of the most important things for CHROs for the coming years is helping managers lead differently.
Great.
Internal teams as well as external teams.
Yeah, so that's a perfect connection with Chris. Yeah, so we mentioned CHROs, how they should learn to work with freelancers in the future. What will be your view here, Chris?
I would just echo Anita's last comment. The thing that keeps me most exercised at the moment is how should a leader be in this new environment? And the onus is on leaders. Leaders are the ones that set the tone. And my focus this coming year is going to be on giving managers the tools and the leadership skills and the inputs they need to step up to that challenge, to lead remote teams more than they have before, to create what did John say, the office that it's worthwhile to come into. And what does that mean for managers? It means, some of our guys are, it sounds basic. It probably is basic. We're putting on, seminars. We're putting on free breakfast, free food. Not just the sort of typical fruit in the kitchen, but we'll have a day where we have 2 or 3 days where we'll have breakfast, coming into the office, and people will come in and just chat and socialize. And these are things that I think we have to plan to do. Otherwise, there will always be people that naturally are more aware and have more of EQ around this, and some of our managers need a bit more help on that. I was going to sort of slightly agree and disagree with John on one thing, and that's not Elon Musk per se, but I think it's quite interesting. I don't see a division between, the old style dinosaur that wants everyone in the office. There are still a few of those, and this kind of new free floating. I think it depends on the kind of industry and sector and business you're running. And what I would say is some of our, quote, more office oriented managers, there's a kind of good you say, well, why? That's the question. Why do you feel more comfortable having people in? And I think for us, what we've realized is that more often it's because several things. Some have a high percentage of graduates and very early career people. It could be their first or second bounce in a role. And so they don't know the company. They haven't forged the relationships that would enable them to be productive yet remotely, because they don't have that connection yet. And it takes longer to do that when you're not sort of interacting daily. There are some people who are customer facing, and the intel on the customer, it's good to have a pod of people where you can review stuff together in the moment, in that learning coaching opportunity. how did that go? Yeah, what could we have done better? So, and there's also, I mean, I think an epidemic, and I use that word kind of advisedly. I have never seen as much usage of our employee assistance programs, of our mental health first aiders. And I'm not talking about people who were already a little bit challenged. I'm talking about people that you and I would think, well, they're really normal. And everyone's normal until you get to lift the lid. And then, you realize how close we all are from being not good and not normal at all, because it just takes something. I've had leaders in the business who have literally fallen from being all fine, all fine, all fine, and then I can't do this anymore. Just not one big event, just accumulation of tiny things, and it becomes too much. And I think for people who are single, for people who may have caring responsibilities and be single, who have no family support locally, who haven't got the structure around them, I think we've perhaps not estimated how much some people rely on that connection with fellow professional humans in a supportive, warm, friendly environment. So I think where we have a pushback on, I want the people in, I feel that there's often, when you ask the why question, there's some very sound reasons why that would be. I think we've got to try and avoid extremes of any kind. Yeah. And the other point I wanted to make on just quickly on the freelance versus non-freelance was, I guess in a tech environment, you do tend to have more people that are highly educated, highly skilled and in demand, so that they lend towards that gig. In a more traditional business, and we've still got a lot of traditional telco engineers, support roles and so on. My focus is on looking internally at what's a gig internally, because to get the internal promotions and mobility you want, particularly among the women in our workforce, which are already in a minority, what we're kind of trying to do is rebadge our vacancies to say, look, here's a piece of work that needs to be done. If anyone would like to apply to do this piece of work, let's talk about how we cut this. Maybe 2 or 3 people do it as a project. Maybe you do it for a day a week. And that way people don't have to feel they're leaving a job to move to a job, but they've got that sort of ability to be a bit more flexible and approach it as in a skills-based way. And that we've seen have had a really good impact on our levels of internal mobility, which for us is a really key metric.
May I jump in for a second?
Sure.
And Chris, I loved some of what you said and got a question for you. So I want to share a little bit of data, and then I want to ask you the question. And that the data. The data is that there's a continuum, and the continuum is from, we've got to get together. We have to be together because it serves a business purpose, et cetera, all the way to the other end, which is we don't really need to get together, et cetera, et cetera. The fear that I have is that HR, human capital, organization development, isn't positioned to have the influence that it needs to have to operate more fully across the continuum, so that in fact you're solving the problem as opposed to fiats at one end or another. And the data that I thought was really interesting, it's not published, but it's interesting data. Catalent, as Alex knows and some of the rest of you may know, it's a large independent management consultancy. And Pat Petiti is the guy that runs it's a friend of mine. We're doing a study together. And the question that we asked was, what percentage of the transformations involving HR significantly actually had significant leadership by HR in them? The answer was fascinating. Only about a quarter of these actually had significant HR involvement, let alone leadership. So I wonder if one of the challenges for both Chris and Anita is, how do we get HR more fully in the game, more gutsy in the game, so that rather than helping the Musks do the next layoff, they're actually sitting down with the Musks saying, there are some alternatives here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What's your feeling about that? I was just struck by the fact that only a quarter of the significant transformations involving HR actually have significant HR involvement. It just blew me away. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think these are very valid questions. But let's move, because you are running short of time. Let's move into more, excuse me, about more kind of practical question. I mean, we are missing at the end of it. This is about talent shortage. So I will very quickly like to ask you if you have to recommend something, one idea to solve talent shortage for the audience. What will be the first thing you will tell them?
So my first thing would be know your numbers. Because if you don't know your numbers, then you don't have a plan. Because it might very well be that for the type of jobs that you're trying to fill, there is enough labor potential and there are enough skilled people. And then you know that you're good for the next 1 or 2 years or maybe 5 years. But the problem that I see is that in most companies, it's an assumption. And assumptions only work if you have the data to underpin it. And if you do not have the data, if you do not know your numbers, then you're building your workforce strategy on quicksand. And that is very, very dangerous in these times.
Chris, what would you recommend as a first, as a simple message?
If I leave out tech because I don't have the answer, I'm sorry. I just have no question answer. I would, one observation I'd make is that we have often underestimated the depth and breadth of our internal talent pool, and we've almost preferred to bring in the shiny new person from the outside who's great at interview, and we haven't taken a risk as bigger. We've made a bigger risk with external hires than giving a risk on somebody who's already got a track record. Maybe is 60-70% there, but with the right support could be a promotion or could fill that role. And I'm always surprised by, you know, when we have internal applicants that sometimes people have hidden skills. They've even worked in the previous job and their job here is something completely different. For example, we had just hired an external comms and PR person who was working a sales role. And so we'd never have picked on him and said, well, you're in sales, you know, you could do this. But his previous role was in a PR and comms for a you know, a big company, and he's doing really, really well. And so I just say be a little more open-minded and take a risk, take a bit of a risk. Your people will repay you, you know, fivefold for that investment and risk that you might take. And people are always ready to move before you think they are. Okay, and if they're not going to move internally, they're going to go somewhere else. And it's cheaper to keep the people you have and invest in talent and training than it is to, you know, pay agencies or freelancers or offshorers or whoever else, if you can. And I appreciate the if is, you know, not all roles fall into that category. Okay, so I think that is answering one of the questions that we had here in the chat about if training more people was one of the solutions for in the tech industry. So yeah, I think that makes and the answer for this question. But also very quickly, John, on your side, if you have to give an advice about where to find talent.
I don't think there's a talent shortage. I think there's a shortage of imagination around how to find the talent that you need. And I think that's a big difference. And so for me, there's a challenge for managers, HR professionals, procurement, all of the folks that are in some way or another involved in staffing our organization, our organizations. I think the very first question is, what is our philosophy of staffing and does it fit in 2023? And if what we're looking for is all full-time people, the challenge is we've just limited ourselves in terms of the ability to pivot, to change, to catch up with what's happening somewhere else. And so we've got to think differently about our workforce. I believe that the most important thing that an organization can do, and obviously I believe in the freelance stuff, is to create a more open talent notion that has three parts. First is the idea that you don't need a full-time person for everything. Second is that you want to think in terms of a flexible blended workforce on an ongoing basis. It's part of the total workforce, as opposed to thinking that it's separate and that contingency is only on demand. And the third thing that I think is awfully important is to throw away all of the keywords that organizations have used to go through resumes and decide who's worth talking to and who's not. Because I promise you that all four of us wouldn't have been able to get some of the jobs that we would have excelled in had the organization, as Chris said, given us a chance. But we are in the mode of, on the one hand, saying we've got a shortage, and on the other hand, saying let's be biased in terms of why this person isn't a good fit. And that's nuts. Organizations need to take more chances. They need a greater imagination on the capability of individuals, both inside and outside. And they need to understand that the fact that I work for 3 different organizations doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means that I'm working for 3 different organizations and I'm in love with 3.
Yeah.
So we've got to sort of move away from this monogamy notion, which is really a kind of colonial notion that doesn't make sense in this world any longer. May I say one more thing, and that is, we shouldn't be afraid of people that don't look like us, that don't have degrees similar to ours. There's an awful lot of intelligence and creativity around.
We should embrace diversity at all levels, and trust people. And the same way that Chris was saying, very, very interesting. We have a few minutes that I would like to try to take the opportunity to answer some of the questions that probably we won't have time for all of them. There was a question here, quite all interesting, but one regarding what would be, I mean, if there's any way to deal with remote hybrid factor with different rewards or compensations. Anita, any view on this?
It's the $1 million question at the moment. How do we reward remote talent? I see a couple of different strategies. There are some companies that are only remote, and they tend to reward and compensate all their people in a similar way. It does not matter where people live. What I see with companies that still have physical locations and remote workers is that they are tying it either to a country or geography or to geographical region, just to ensure that people that work in similar roles in locations that are close by do not have very large gaps in compensation. But there are all kinds of new methods being worked out today. So also there, I expect to see a lot of change and development in how we think about compensation, but also how we compensate people.
Yeah, definitely. That's not an easy question. Yeah.
No.
The next one is probably not easy to. Yeah. This one will be for Chris, but I know that you love this team. Yeah. So how to deal with hybrid teams when it comes to company culture?
Depends on many factors here, but briefly, you know, I think we have to work harder. I think we have to engage those teams and create the kind of experiences that bring people together that are relevant. So as John says, you know, not coming in just for the sake of sitting together to work, but we have to work harder as managers. I think one of the things we are very, very keen to do more of is recognition, and to link the culture and our values to the way we recognize teams. We call out people who've done things that are kind of supporting and reinforcing our values. You're looking for opportunities to, you know, to bring those values in and culture into the working, and that means, you know, that for managers who are doing remote meetings, reward people on those calls, have something delivered to their home, whereas before they'd have seen it in the office. So again, it's doing what we would do in an office, but it's thinking about not necessarily like for like, but how does that translate into you know, into that more hybrid environment. And I think also perhaps with meetings, we're either having one in person all we're having one remote, but those hybrid meetings where half the room are listening on Zoom and half are in the room, we feel that's not balanced. That's not really a reflection of culture either, because people are getting a different experience of the same thing. So lots of different ways that we look at reinforcing culture. But when we bring people together, making it an event, making it special, making it worth people's while, and creating the space for people to socialize as well as to do the work input at the same time.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think that's definitely, I mean, very, very interesting. We do have additional questions, but no time for them. Really sorry for that. Because that being a very interesting subject, we could be discussing this for hours and hours, but we need to come to an end. So just to close the webinar, I would like to thank you all of you. That was really, I mean, fantastic to have you here. Also, thank you to all the attendants, and also for being so active and raising so many comments and questions. As a final point, I would like to just share with you, I mean, this is the 1 minute advertising about Outvise. I would like just to share with you at how we do work. I mean, we are, as you know, we are a talent marketplace for highly skilled professionals. And the way we work is very simple. This is really a talent on demand concept. You post a project on the platform, also an account manager, you will receive top profiles in 48 hours. So really talent on demand, not weeks, not months, 48 hours. You will be able to discuss and review the experts one by one, and we will take all the paperwork on our side. So you can relax and things get done, yeah? So this is really, I mean, as Outvise, we definitely see that we are one of those new talent partners that companies are starting to consider as one of their key pillars when thinking about the future of work and how to reinforce the access to talent. So I think that we are done. It's at least in continental Europe, it's 5 o'clock sharp. Please, I mean, now don't quit before completing the short survey that will appear in your screen. Yeah. So thank you to all of you. We will be at least with the speakers. We'll get keep in touch and still have very interesting conversations in the future. Yeah. So thank you to all of you, and happy Christmas to John.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's John's birthday, so happy Christmas to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
See you guys. This was fun. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. Bye now.